All right. So what's a billboard? It's kind of funny because we see them all the time, but when you actually stop and think about what the definition of a billboard is, it's pretty simple. It's a very large board, usually by the roadside or attached to a building, and it's used for displaying advertising, and it can also be called an outdoor board. And what do we know about them? Well, they're everywhere. And they're actually an incredibly effective branding tool. So, there are 6 rules of billboard advertising, which we go over in that reading for this week. 6 words or less is ideal, which you may be saying to yourself, 6 words or less, how can I come up with 6 words or less? Think about how fast if you're going 55 miles an hour or 65, or even in some places, not that I want to say that I drive over 70 in my Prius, but I do. I can't sit there and read a paragraph of text, so I'm going to completely disregard your advertising. So that's why 6 words or less is ideal. People are flying past these things. You want to get noticed, but you don't want to be a huge distraction, because if you're a huge distraction, you may cause accidents. This is not a place for direct response. That means, putting a phone number, putting a website, saying call us now. That's not really the place for it. You want to be smart, but you don't want to be too clever. The more billboards, the better. And then don't say it, show it. So these are some really good rules. And I found this quote when I was putting the slide together that said, any copy that runs on a billboard should fit on the back of a business card. And I think that that's a really good idea. Not only do, business cards, when you think about it, most people are looking at the front, they might not necessarily flip it over to look at the back, but a business card is extremely small. So if you can't fit your message on the back of a business card, you shouldn't put that on a billboard. We also have magazine ads. So these are advertisements placed in magazines, bought by and read by consumers. Magazine ads target a specific audience. They're more valued by consumers because they pay for the content. The words and images alone must convey the idea. When the line and visual work off one another, together they create greater meaning. So just like a good comedy team or a musical duet, the total effect is greater than the sum of the separate parts. It is seamless. You want to grab attention, you want to keep attention, you want to be relevant, and you want to serve as a call to action. So here are 2 pretty good magazine ads I found. One is obviously for McDonald's. There isn't even any words to it, but you know exactly what it's for. Like, we just have a small McDonald's logo at the bottom, and you have the French fries, and it's carved out of an entire potato. It really gets the message across. I don't think that this ad needs anything else to it, and it works on its own, just like this. Then we have one for a bamboo tablet. So it shows you all of the different things it can do, just with the one pen. So again, it's like, your own almost Swiss Army creative tool. Then we have newspaper ads. So if anyone has ever worked at a newspaper, which I have, newspaper ads, and especially car ads and newspaper ads, are notorious for cramming the most information possible into the space that is allotted for them. These ads target a specific audience. There's usually credibility and trust. There's sale ads and coupons, and the consumers like incentives. So the people who are looking at those ads are looking for a deal. It's not the industry it once was, because the newspapers are losing their readership due to the internet. There's a lot of use of call to actions, offer incentives, target specific consumers with placement, and they want to make it stand out against the black and white of the paper. So some ads do run in color, but the majority of the newspaper ads that you're probably seeing, which may be those free newspapers that are sent to your house, so not necessarily a newspaper that you subscribe to, those ads are usually in black and white. And this is just a good example of 2 newspaper ads that I had to create. And you can just see the amount of information that they wanted to place in each ad. Each little square is almost its own ad for a specific vehicle. And, it takes some practice figuring out, how to lay out an ad like this with the information that you're given. So I got to say though, I don't really miss making these ads sometimes. There was just always so much that went into them. But then, and I used to do the real estate ads, and it was the same thing. Then we have business cards. So those are, you might not think about it, but business cards, they're a pretty big part of advertising. They're part of a business's visual identity. It's usually a small card that's just handed to a customer with contact and company information on it. However, not just a paper card. They're not just paper cards anymore. A lot of times they are interactive. So I found an example of an interactive business card where it has their information, but then you can fold the card to create this this chair when you're done. So that's, it's something where if a customer sits there and they interact with your card and they build this chair, chances are good they're not going to lose your card. They're probably going to put this on their desk, and maybe they'll put like, I don't know, something on top of the chair, like, like a bottle of whiteout or something. It might hold something, they might put paper clips on top of the chair. But either way, if you have a really cool card like this, your customer isn't going to just take it and chuck it into the trash. So, you want to think about these business cards and think about it as your overall branding of yourself. They're not usually associated with advertising per se. However, they can be used for brand marketing or for personal experience. You want to make your cards professional and use color logos for brand marketing. You want to utilize blank space for special offers, incentives, or advertising copy. So, make it different. Don't just put your name and your phone number. Make it cool. Then we have postcards. These are direct mail advertising pieces sent to consumers via mail. Postcards can be personalized information, They can target specific audiences. They can be timely, so they can be great for call to actions like hurry in or now open. I used to create a lot of postcards for real estate companies, not so much for a specific house that was for sale, unless if it was a multi-million-dollar house where they knew it wasn't going to sell within the next week. But a lot of times just to solicit business, like, we've sold this house, and this house in your neighborhood. Are you looking for a realtor? A lot of hair salons like to use postcards, and they'll put a nice big picture of, the staff on the front, and on the back, some offers for people to come in to get new clients. You've probably gotten some postcards from dentist office doing the same thing. Dental offices love sending out postcards. So that's how they try to target specific audiences. What they do is they purchase zip codes, and they target a specific zip code to try to get more clients, more customers to come in, because those zip codes are probably within a radius of either the office or the shop or what have you. You want to make them creative and interactive. You want to make it personal. Use call to actions, which we're going to discuss what those are later on. And you want to also keep your designs professional. Then we have, when we're creating our advertisements, we have visuals and we have words. So when you're trying to put together an advertising piece, you need to think to yourself, who is the star? Who's the main character of this piece? Is it the visual or is it the words? Because sometimes if you don't allow one to be the star or the hero of the ad, then they tend to compete with each other, and it might not be the best representation of your message. So most creative professionals agree that either the word or the visual needs to be the hero of the ad. This means that the other should take on a supporting role, because if both the visual and the words are competing for attention, then it may cause confusion or even a power overdose. So in this advertisement, we have a very strong visual, but which is the lion, and the lion is really the hero of the ad. The text, even the logo, those are supporting roles, because the viewer's drawn in by this bold image, and it's intriguing enough that they're going to wonder, what this place is. And this was actually an ad I had to design for a magazine out in Arizona when I lived out in Arizona. And you can see it had a coupon. Everything I did seemed to be coupon based, a couple of years ago. So then we also have the visual verbal relationship. So you want to think of this. The words determine the visual form. The words contest the visual form, creating contrast or irony. The words are straightforward and the visual is unusual. So that is, it could be humorous, odd, curious, zany, or shocking. Or the visual is straightforward and the words are unusual. So humorous, odd, curious, zany, or shocking. That's like your push and pull of the visual verbal relationship that you have. So here's an example. Let's just look at this image of a teddy bear. So you want to take a moment and reflect on the story that this image may bring to your mind, because there isn't a story at this point with this image. So put that story and image aside for a minute while you think of the words, go bear hunting. So taken literally, the demand to hunt may produce a mind's eye view of a reasonably large animal with big teeth, a fierce appetite, and this animal might be staring down the barrel of your gun. Although if you take that image, which is exhilarating, frightening, repugnant maybe, your view will change considerably if you add the words go bear hunting to the image of this teddy bear. So this is where that visual verbal relationship comes in. Now look at the ad. Go bear hunting. Next to this teddy bear. Clearly, it's a completely different message when that visual and that verbal are put side by side together. So the visual proximity between the text, go bear hunting, and the image of the bear builds perceptual ties that lead, in this case, to visual grouping through proximity. However, proximity does not by itself produce meaningful bonds. Instead, proximity allows a cohesive tie to develop. That cohesive tie binds the named bear to the image of the bear. The image next to that text transforms the default meaning of the word bear with the context of bear hunting to a new literal meaning in the presence of a specific teddy bear's image. So instead of just going bear hunting and thinking of, this big ferocious bear, you will see this image of a teddy bear and think of yourself hunting through all the different teddy bears in the store, looking for the perfect teddy bear for whoever it is you may be buying that for. It gives it a totally different context. And, it's kind of a weird way to advertise teddy bears, to say to go bear hunting. So we have a couple of different types of ads that are out there. We have visual-driven ads, those in which the visual carries the weight of the ad message, or in which there's no ad copy other than the sign-off. The visual captures the viewer's attention first. So the sign-off might be, the logo, maybe the tagline, but there's no ad copy literally stating what is going on in that ad. So in this example, which is a visually driven ad, we have an image of the Hulk hand. We have an image of a Band-Aid box. There's no headline, no slogan, and no body copy. But does the ad work without a headline, slogan, and body copy? That's my question to you. When you look at this ad, do you say to yourself, oh, I get it? Like, I don't think that this ad, I'm sure that there were a couple of different versions that were created. If I know the creative process and I know the advertising process, I'm sure at first somebody in marketing or somebody in copywriting said, well, it needs a headline. Say, our Band-Aids are so strong that They'll even work on the Hulk. Oh yeah, and then you can add a slogan that says strong enough for the Hulk. Maybe we can add some body copy that says, our new Band-Aids have a flexible fabric and it won't break even on a Hulk size hand. But the visual is so striking in this ad that you don't even need any of that body copy. You've just got this massive hand. You can clearly see the flexible fabric of the Band-Aid brand Band-Aid, and you've got the box down here. There's nothing else that is needed to make that ad work. And this goes back to sometimes things are better the simpler that they are. There was no need to muddy the message. But at the same time, we can have copy-driven ads that don't even have a visual. So they convey the advertising message primarily through the words, and there may be no visual other than the design of the typography, which, as we know as designers, can be a visual all on its own, and the logo or product shot in the sign-off. The copy captures the viewer's attention first. So I really like this copy-driven ad, because when you read it out loud, you realize there's two ways to read it. And, the lack of, I always say, the lack of punctuation really changes your message. If you miss a comma, it can change everything. I also grade English for high school students, so I'm constantly letting them know when they're missing commas that, it can completely change the meaning of what they're trying to say. So we can read this two ways. We've got everything we need. We need a loan. For all of life's twists and turns, flexible financial plans, Swiss Life. So the only image in this ad is the logo at the bottom. There's no central image. There's a logo, but there's headline and body copy. And the missing punctuation forces you to choose to read this ad both ways. We've got everything we need a loan. Oh, we've got everything we need, but we need a loan. And they could have been more literal and said, we've got everything we need, comma, but we need a loan. But the way they've done it is extremely clever. So again, it's kind of like the Hulk ad. Sure, they could have added a headline. They could have added, more, body copy, a slogan, something, and made the ad so literal that you're like, yes, like you're being beaten over the head with a stick. Like, yes, we get it. The Hulk, he's strong, and your Band-Aids are strong. Thank you for telling us in 7 different ways. But they took a chance that the viewer isn't stupid, and the viewer is going to get this. And the same was done with this ad. They took the chance and wrote it in a clever enough way that the viewer is going to read it, and then read it again, and probably read it 3 times and say, oh, that was pretty witty, which means that they have now, your viewer, because they've taken in the information on their own, they're committing it more to memory that way. If it's extremely literal, they're going to say, oh, all right, flip the page and move on. But you've created an ad that they are now in their mind interacting with. And that makes it successful right there. So all of these things that are done kind of come back to copywriting. And there are some rules of copywriting, but as we know in design, there's rules. Once you understand the rules, sometimes the rules are meant to be broken. But you should always understand the rules first before you go around breaking them. So these are the rules of copywriting. Say it in the line. Don't rely on the body copy. Know why? Most people don't bother to read body copy. Here's an example. I'm going to go back a couple of slides, even this one. Now, you may have, when I was going over this ad, you probably looked at the lion, you probably looked at Out of Africa Wild Park, you saw that there was a coupon here, but what are the chances that while we were discussing this ad, you read safari tours, shows, hands-on interaction, gift shop, food, your best wild animal adventure, and you looked, oh, all right, tickets are $28 for adults. Oh, wow, they were regular $36 and $16 for kids, and they were regular $20, but I must present the coupon. Chances are pretty good you were looking at the lion and you said, oh, out of Africa Wildlife Park. Okay, that seems pretty cool. And that's about as far as you got, maybe right here. You probably didn't sit there and read all of the body copy in this ad when we were discussing this ad. Because guess what? Most people don't read the body copy. It's true. And even with this ad, you probably read this line to yourself 3 times. But if I hadn't read you for all of life's twists and turns, flexible financial plans, you knew it was there, but chances are probably good that you didn't even read that. So this goes back to that rule of copywriting. You want to say it in the line. That means like your headline, your subheadline, something like that, like your catchphrase. You don't want to bother with putting in pertinent information in the body copy for them to find. Tagline as message. So the tagline is the catchphrase that conveys the brand or group's benefits or spirit and expresses an umbrella theme or strategy for a campaign or series of campaigns. It is also called a claim, an endline, a slogan, or a strapline. So some examples are, friends don't let friends drive drunk. You've probably heard that one if you live in the U.S. from the U.S. Department of Transportation, or don't leave home without it, the American Express tagline. So that's another thing you want to think about. That's your message right there in that tagline. Then you want to ask yourself when you have finished writing out that copy, do I sound like a sales pitch? Like, do I sound like a cliche salesman right here? So once you've written a line or body copy, it is highly advisable to test it by saying it out loud. Does it sound stiff or like an annoying salesperson trying to sell you something? Or does it sound clever? But is it too clever that people aren't going to get it? There's a lot of nuances you really need to think about when you're writing up body copy. So I liked the copy of this casino ad. It's straight to the point. Here's a hamster bladder. Here's a human bladder. You're a lot luckier than you think. Mystic Lake Casino. We're not telling you anything about coming and using our slot machines or how many people win, or we have X amount of people who won last week and, so many dollars were paid out. Nope. All we're saying is, people think of casinos, they think of luck. Look at the size of your bladder. Haha, you're a lot luckier than you think. Definitely, the message is right there in that tagline. It doesn't sound like a sales pitch. They're not even trying to, give you a deal to come in. They're just putting a little nugget in your head that you might be lucky if you come. So, some copywriting tips, how to not sound like a sales pitch, because I think that's the hardest part when you're writing ad copy. And one part of my job that I've never, ever, ever, ever enjoyed as a graphic designer is writing out the ad copy. You know what? I can design the ad. If you give me ad copy and it needs work, I'm really good at giving you suggestions, but sometimes just putting that pencil to paper and coming up with ad copy, that's one of the harder parts. I've never done copywriting as a job. And I mean, maybe if that was the only part of the job and I didn't have to design the ad afterwards, I would be good at it. But I think I definitely rather enjoy designing with ad copy I'm given. So I have a hard time with that. So I can definitely empathize with people who also have difficulty writing out some ad copy, because a lot of times we do tend to get too literal and then we sound like we're making a sales pitch. So you want to be authentic. Consumers are very wary of offers that are too good to be true. You want to use verbs instead of adjectives. So Brian is an intelligent, hardworking, and insightful young man versus Brian founded a successful advertising company, created a popular blog, and leads a talented team of designers. The second sentence sounds better, and in a roundabout way sells Brian without, literally selling Brian. You want to touch a reader's emotional core. You want to set a tone of mood. You also always want to be aware of your demographic. And if you can, and if you're good at it, use humor. So when it comes to touching a reader's emotional core, let's take a look at this ad right here. It's for a digital SLR camera, the Pentax K100D. I'm not familiar with this camera, honestly, but it says focus speed versus toddler speed. So what do we think when we think of a toddler? They take off real quick. So you probably want your autofocus to keep up with your toddler. So, you're really touching at, a parent's emotional core. You're setting a tone or mood, but you also need to be aware of your demographic. A great place to advertise, or use this specific ad will probably be in like a parenting magazine or, a maternity magazine, something along those lines. Like this ad probably would fall extremely flat if you put it in 17 magazine. The 17-year-olds would be like, thanks, I'm not really all set with keeping up with the toddler at 16, but okay. And I don't have the money to buy that camera. So that's where you need to be aware of your demographic. So here's some tips. Be aware of grammar and punctuation. The main goal of copywriting is to communicate. So play with grammar and punctuation so the reader reads it as you want it to sound. So there are times where it's okay to be grammatically incorrect, such as this example. Avoid negatives. No, never, not, nothing. It's just, accentuate the positive, forget the negative, basically. Be aware of paragraph and sentence length. That goes back to the body copy, because you know what? Is anybody going to read this? Chances are in an ad, no, you're not writing a novel. Use a hook. Case in point, here's a good one. Haagen-Dazs used to have a little line of ad copy made with 100% Madagascar vanilla. Haagen-Dazs, which is no stranger to marketing gimmicks, used to use this line of copy in the mid to late 90s to 2000s to promote their vanilla ice cream in advertising, packaging, and storefront displays. It sounds exotic and premium, something that catches your eye. It makes you pause and say, ooh, vanilla from Madagascar. However, little did the consumer know at the time that 97% of the world's vanilla is actually grown in Madagascar. So it's not really, anything to be pushed. And they stopped using that tagline, because they were called out on that. And I tried to do a Google image search for an ad online that still showed the made with 100% Madagascar vanilla, and I actually couldn't find it. So, they've done a pretty good job of scrubbing their websites of old images that showed those old advertisements. I don't know if there might have been I don't know if there was like a lawsuit. People love to sue about these sorts of things, or if something happened where they had to change their advertising, but I couldn't anyways, after probably searching for an hour, find an example of one of their old ads that showed this. So let's talk about some approaches, which are specific frameworks which provide a general sense of how conventional advertising is structured. So we have demonstration, comparison, a spokesperson, an endorsement, and I'm going to show you guys examples of this, of each of these afterwards on subsequent slides, but I just want to go over the whole list. We have testimonial, a problem and a solution, slice of life, storytelling, cartoon, musical, misdirection, adoption, documentary, mockumentary, a montage, animation, consumer-generated creative content, podbusters, entertainment, and then we have gags, stunts, and pranks. Although I feel like these were big a couple of years ago, and then everybody started doing them. So I haven't seen a lot of gag stunts and pranks lately, which is probably a good thing. So demonstration. A demonstration is a display of how the product or service works or functions, usually providing evidence or proof of the brand's soundness. It is informational, appealing to our rational mind and practical needs, and rather than our desires, and usually a demonstration emphasizes a functional benefit. So I thought this was a great outdoor advertisement for Windex. They just added like a fog overlay to the bus stop, and the only part that is not fogged out is where the Windex is spraying. So to demonstrate that, Windex will basically clean anything. It'll clean even this dirty old outdoor bus stop. I thought that was a great example of a demonstration ad. Then we have comparison. A comparison format compares and contrasts one brand, either in relation to a competing brand or two brands, or to the entire product or service category in order to display the differences between them and ultimately claim that the brand being advertised is superior. So there are a couple of famous comparisons out there. The first one and the one that I found an example of, and they used to run this a lot in the 80s, was the Pepsi Challenge, which would ask consumers to take a taste test between Coke and Pepsi. And this was referred to the Cola Wars back in the 70s and 80s. Then there have been a couple of other ones, like I think it's Ragu and Prego have run a couple of taste test challenge comparison ads. There might have been, there's probably another famous one that I'm not thinking of. But, oh, nice. James took that because they were always mad that you chose Coke. Nice. We didn't drink soda when I was a kid. My mom didn't allow us to drink any soda, but I remember once like being in the store and they were doing it, and I was like, I want to go do the Pepsi challenge, and my mom was like, no, you don't drink soda. It's bad for your teeth. It was true. She's like, you don't like either. You wouldn't know which one was which I really seriously would not have. Then we have the spokesperson. So that's when a spokesperson, who could be an average person. A lot of times these days it's actors, models, or celebrities. They positively represent the product, service, or group. If the role is a recurring one, that individual becomes the face and voice of the brand. So I have an example from St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital where Marlo Thomas was their spokesperson. This is a bit different than an endorsement. So an endorsement is a public statement of approval for a product or service. It can include verbal statements or depictions of the name, signature, likeness, or other identifying personal characteristics of an individual, or the name or seal of an organization. The party whose opinions, beliefs, findings, or experiences the message appears to reflect is called the endorser, and it may be an individual, group, or institution. So that's a little bit different. That's like, if you see like medical ads, and somebody says that they're taking a specific medication and it works for them, that's more of like an endorsement that it works for them. It could also be that somebody endorses somebody when they're running for office and they put them in an ad. So, endorsements are a little bit different. These two versions here are specific spokespeople that the ads are using. Then we have a testimonial. So a testimonial is a favorable message delivered by an expert, the guy or the gal next door, or even a celebrity, reflecting his or her opinions, beliefs, findings, or experiences in support of the sponsoring advertiser. An expert's testimony can engender trust in the audience. So this is a version of a testimonial ad that I found. It's Katy Perry for Proactive. You've probably seen this ad.
Breakthrough artist Katy Perry is one of music's biggest stars with songs that show off her feisty girl power charisma. But Kate has a secret.
Yeah, you'd think I would be the most confident person, but the most confident person still has their moments. And a lot of my most insecure moments related to my face and to my acne problems. I had acne right here, next to my mouth. the microphone's here, where everybody's watching. I wanted to just hide. I finally decided I have nothing to lose because
So there we go. And, not to play the full ad, but there it is. She has the same problem as you. She's a famous person, but guess what worked for her? Using Proactive. And there she is, during the ad, holding up the bottle of the Proactive, saying that it worked for her. And she's got beautiful, clear skin now in this ad. So that's her testimonial that the product worked. Then you can have a problem solution. So the problem solution approach is sometimes used when the product, service, or group successfully solves an actual problem, like flaking skin, stains, identity theft, cleaning, cyberbullying in one of life's or, the greater community. So here we have, naturally beautiful results for a vino, and, maybe the problem is that you have bad skin, but you use a vino, and who do they put on the ad but, Jennifer Aniston, who looks great no matter what. So if you use their product, your problem of having bad skin, they are your solution. Then there are a couple of different approaches, such as storytelling. So storytelling is a narrative format in which the tale is told to an audience utilizing voice, gesture, and or imagery. We have the story, the teller, and the listeners. Since the active imagination of the audience and the creation of illusion is key, media such as radio can allow for this conjuring. So I have an Oil of Olay ad which uses storytelling as their approach to discuss their product.
Laser treatment is one way to target lines and wrinkles below the skin surface, but there is a less drastic approach. New improved Olay Regenerist to help regenerate skin surface at the cellular level. Try new Olay Regenerist.
So even though that, this is obviously a TV ad, if you closed your eyes and you listened just to the words being told in that ad, there's a story behind that ad, and you could very well use just the audio of that ad on the radio, and the same point would get across. It used to just be that you had to have laser surgery done. Well, now you can use our product and get the same results, even though we all know you'll definitely not get the same results. But that's their story, and they're sticking to it. But and they basically get through this entire ad in 15 seconds and get their entire point across in this storytelling fashion in 15 seconds. Another example is cartoons. So a cartoon is a single panel pictorial sketch or a sequence of drawings, which is known as the cartoon strip, that tells a very short story or comments on a topical event or theme. In a single panel cartoon, there's cooperative action between the drawing and the caption, but now people are using cartoons that are well known in their ads. So MetLife, for the last couple of years, they have been using the Peanuts gang to help them advertise their brand of insurance, usually the life insurance. And you can see, they've got Snoopy, they've got Charlie Brown right here. Even the color scheme goes along with the Peanuts color scheme. So they are basically touching an emotional response. If you were a kid who read, the cartoons in the newspaper and you are aware of the Peanuts from your childhood, you're going to possibly relate a little bit better to their insurance company, because that you reminisce of your days as a child and remembering reading the Peanuts. Then we have musical. So in an advertising, a musical is a narrative or play that is music-based and where music, singing, or dancing are the main vehicle for telling the story. So I probably don't even need to play this ad because you can probably visualize it in your head. But it's those old iPod commercials where it had the silhouette dancing to the music in the background. I mean, they didn't even really need to tell you what it was. You saw in white the iPod there, and it would just end with the Apple logo. So I'm not even going to play that ad because I actually want to play you this misdirection ad, which cracks me up every time I see it. So the misdirection ads start out one way and then suddenly they change directions. So thinking of the TV commercial is about one thing, viewers are surprised by the real message. And these ads can work for a variety of reasons. One is the element of surprise. We're led one way, but are surprised to find ourselves taken somewhere entirely differently. And then there's always a risk that this type of approach, once you've seen the ad, you know the surprise ending, so you won't want to watch it through another time. But this one makes me laugh every single time, so I'm going to play this one for you.
These feet belong to Roger Camp, an extraordinary man who overcame a tremendous challenge. Roger is determined to lead an ordinary life, to perform the everyday tasks that you and I take for granted. So he won't miss a second of FoxSports.com. Whether it's daily insights from John Madden or real-time scores and stats, it's like having the NFL on Fox online.
So clearly, when you first see the person, putting the diaper on with their feet, you're like, oh, they probably don't have any arms. And, oh, that's, they've overcome this, everything. And then you just see it's, a guy who doesn't want to, stop typing on the internet. And obviously, as you can tell by the computer in the ad, that's a very old ad. It's from 2000. And it would probably not fly today. But it's such a great example of misdirection because if you haven't seen that before, you're like, wait, what? So, it's one of those ones where if it was on TV all the time, you'd be like, oh, I know exactly how this ends. But, it's kind of funny to see every couple of years when I bring this one out of hibernation. So we can have adoption, which means adopting or appropriating another form of visual art, such as fine art, or another form of artistic work, such as a children's book. So, this ad right here for Telluride is, the illustrations have such a children's book feel. So, it's for, I think it's for a ski resort, honestly, the whole ad. And you'd have to read the whole story, which again is one of those things where if the image pulls you in, you may read the story, but if the image doesn't pull you in and it's not successful, chances are good you might flip the page and not read the story and find out about it. Then you have documentary. So documentary is a presentation of facts and information, usually about a social, historical, or political cause. In advertising, a documentary style format is often used for public service advertisements. So a couple of years ago on Facebook, there was the whole thing about the dress, whether the dress was white and gold or black and blue. So in this ad, the dress is clearly white and gold, but it's for domestic violence, the ad. And it says, why is it so hard to see black and blue? And then it goes into a statistic on victims of abuse and how it's no illusion. So they're taking something from pop culture that we probably all saw a couple of years ago and remember, and using it as the message of their cause, and it draws you in and it makes you more aware of their cause than if you just had, a statistic that you're used to, that you've seen a million times, and it might not resonate with you in the same way. At the same time, though, we can have a mockumentary, which is a mock documentary or spoof created or shot in the style of a documentary. So the whole purpose of the mockumentary is to say that this isn't a commercial. This is real, even though it's clearly a commercial and it's clearly not real. So here is an example of a mockumentary I was able to find. We won't watch the whole thing.
Oh, it was definitely the most difficult time of both our lives.
Why would you do that?
It's just something that
That's all anyone ever does is pick at me.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Hold on,
I need
pick
some
them up.
privacy. David, I need you to take a break.
Look, you want some?
The colors are extraordinary.
I was one of the first people to see David when he was admitted here.
I'm the one who found him. And I seen the whole thing happen.
My name is David Millwood, and 14 months ago, I was struck by a rainbow. And I am now made of Skittles.
So you can see how weird this is shot, like it's a real documentary, but clearly, you know, the guy's now a Skittle man and this is not a documentary. But you can see where it's an effective ad. I was never really, apparently I don't eat a lot of sugar. I was never really a fan of Skittles either. Had a very boring life. So, but yeah, you know, it's, you know, it's clever. It's definitely, you know, they have to taste the rainbow, be the rainbow. But this was a very clever ad. And it's also like 3.5 minutes long. So, you know, this is something that was clearly made for YouTube for people to go in and watch, you know, on their own. Something that length is not going to run, you know, as a commercial on TV, because they would never want to purchase that much airtime to play that commercial. Then we have, I'm not sure if this video is going to work. It looks like I'm getting this video is no longer available, but we have a montage, which is the assembling of various short clips or images into a sequence, usually married by look and feel or theme, music, or voiceover narration. The montage is carefully cut and edited together to create a unique whole. Montage can also be used to illustrate the passage of time, and though many think it tends to fragment spatial unity. Let me see. Oh, no, it's no longer available. Boo. And honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head what I had for the ad there. But you can think in your head what a montage looks like. Then we have animation, which is exactly what you're thinking it is. You know, moving images that consist of a series of drawn, painted, or modeled scenes. In advertising, animation can be thought of as a method or technique for visualizing an idea. So this is an ad for the state of Idaho, which uses all animation.
Education is freedom. The freedom to imagine a better life and make it a reality. Unfortunately, the reality for Idaho children is an education system that's holding them back. Right now, nearly a third of Idaho third graders are not reading at grade level. Studies show that students who aren't reading at grade level by 4th grade struggle in school and are more likely to drop out. By 8th grade, less than half our students are proficient in reading and math. To make matters worse, Idaho has the worst go-on rate in the nation.
So as you can see, you know, the way the animation is used in here, it's like a lot of stills, but they move throughout the story. You know, it's not your typical just a cartoon. You know, it's really illustrating the points that the ad is trying to make. Then we have consumer-generated creative content. And my example kind of bums me out because Doritos doesn't do this anymore. But it's when a brand or a group sponsors a short film competition or competition for a TV spot to be aired, you know, during the World Series or during the Super Bowl. It's a way to generate enthusiasm among people while acquiring creative solutions for the brand. So Doritos used to do the create your own Super Bowl commercials, and the top 3 were aired during the Super Bowl, and then people would go in and vote for, you know, which one that they liked the most. So it was really interactive because, number one, Doritos did not have to come up with the creative on their own. So it took all of the pressure off of them. Number 2, you know, budding filmmakers used to use this as a way to get themselves known, and they would create an ad for Doritos in the hopes that it would be aired. Number 3, you are now driving consumers not only to buy Doritos, but also to your website to vote and see which ones they like the best, because the voting would be for the top 3 to go on to the Super Bowl, and then for which one was the best ad. So, you know, it was kind of twofold. You're just like driving consumers right to your website, and you're getting everybody to interact with your brand. And I'm not quite sure why, but the last Super Bowl, they did not run the create your own Super Bowl ad. It was kind of a bummer because I used to like to see those. They were always, sometimes they were way more clever than the ones that the advertising companies come up with. Then we have Podbusters. So Podbusters are very short form content created to complement the TV program and commercials containing sponsored messages called bitcoms, minisodes, or microseries. They are customized spots sponsored by marketers that interrupt commercials that interrupt shows. So The Walking Dead has been known to run some of these during the commercials on their show. Then we have Entertainment. So this is probably, I think this one comes back almost every Easter time, but it's seriously one of my favorite commercials. What does a gorilla playing drums to the sound of Phil Collins have to do with Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate? Literally nothing. But entertainment does not have to do with the product as long as it grabs the consumer's attention and it entertains them. So this might be my favorite one out of all of the commercials. So you see what I mean? Like, number one, that commercial is absolutely hysterical. And number two, what does that even have to do with like Cadbury milk chocolate? Nothing. It doesn't matter. But I can almost guarantee you that even if you don't know what the commercial is about, you will watch it till the end to see like what is going on with the gorilla. And then even if you do know what the commercial is about, because it's so funny, you'll probably still watch it to the end. Like, that's one of those commercials where every time it came on, I would never change the channel, basically, because I find it so hysterical. Then we have the gags, stunts, and pranks. So, as Heffernan pointed out, the great subjects of online videos are stunts, pranks, violence, gotchas, virtuosity, upsets, and transformations. 19 online video sharing, microsites, and mobile platforms will continue to spawn their own formats. Some will be much like vaudeville or variety shows with short blasts of entertainment that pull our collective legs and make us happy to watch for the punchlines. And like I was saying, I feel like there were a lot of those gag, stunts, and pranks last couple of years, but they've kind of died out. But this is one that I think this originally aired during a Super Bowl too. All of the best ads seem to run during the Super Bowl, or I'm just such a big football fan that that's the only time I watch commercials. It's one or the other. But you probably know which one I'm talking about. It's the Pepsi Jeff Gordon test drive commercial. And I'm not going to play that ad because everybody's like more than familiar with that ad. So what is the call to action? You probably heard me on the last couple of slides saying, you got to have a call to action. Make sure that call to action stands out. Use a call to action. So what exactly is a call to action in advertising? It's usually abbreviated the CTA, but it can be an image or line of text that prompts your visitor, leads, and customers to take action. So it's quite literally a call to take an action. The action you want people to take could be anything. It could be to download an ebook, sign up for a webinar, get a coupon, attend an event. The CTA can be placed anywhere in your marketing, on your website, in an ebook, in an email, or even at the end of a blog post. If you're still not sure what they are, you will know them when you see them. So here are some examples of call to actions. Sign up for free, twice on this ad. Share the love, press the button, create your event, add to cart, download now, learn more, sign up today, search now, buy now, download, learn more, apply now, subscribe, order now, download now, sign up today, purchase now, bookmark us. Those are all call to actions. And you've probably seen them a lot on websites, especially if you're trying to decide whether or not you are buying. Yeah, I love MailChimp too. I haven't used it in a while, but it is great if you have to send out email blasts. MailChimp is the way to go. Sign up now. Sign up for free. So there is a checklist for, creating an effective call to action. It should have an eye-catching design. So for someone to click on your call to action, they have to first notice that it exists. This is pretty much the one time you can veer off course from your branding guidelines. Your call to actions colors should actually contrast with your website design, yet also appear large enough to be noticed. If it kind of blends in with everything and blends in to the background, there is a good chance that it will be lost in the shuffle. So you want to make sure that you're standing out. It's a call to action. It should stand out above everything else. Not above everything else, but it should stand out on its own. It should be copy that makes people want to act. It's not enough to say submit and put a submit button as your call to actions copy. You need a concise, jargon-free phrase that uses actionable verbs to catch people's attention. There should also be a clear value proposition. So people should know exactly what will happen when they click on that call to action. And we can go back to this one. So if I click up here on this call to action that says sign up free, it should bring me to a page where I will fill out a form to sign up for MailChimp free. If I click on this one that says share the love, it should automatically share, to either, or ask me where I want to share, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever, this article that I just read. If I click on create my event, it should probably pull up a form where I can put in my input to create my event. If I click on add to cart, it should add that item that I've been looking at to my cart. If I click on download now, it should start a download of whatever it is that I'm looking at on my screen. So, it should, what I think is going to happen should happen when I click on those buttons. And then for the web, a specific page, ideally a landing page, aligned with one stage in the sales cycle, you want to have that. A call to action is most effective if people are taken to a dedicated landing page after clicking it, rather than just some random page on your website. You want them to feel that this page that they're brought to take care of this right now is not always available. It creates, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm losing my vocabulary today. It creates the action. It creates the, oh, it's a Monday. Not the excitement. You know what I mean? I know you guys know what I'm talking about. I'll never remember the word now. But anyways, you want them to think it's a limited time offer, basically, is what I'm trying to get at in not a very eloquent way right now.